As someone who used to not even believe there was a God at one point in my life, and I'm now a Christian, Kings of Israel had a lot to prove to me. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, thanks for coming back to the Dice Odyssey. I'm Kaz, and today we're going to be reviewing this game here, Kings of Israel by Funhill Games. Now this game is a biblically themed game, and so basically what you're looking at is the historical aspects of the Kingdom of Israel. This is before the time of Christ and so on and so forth. Now, going into this, I have to straight up tell you, and I said this at the beginning, I am now a believer in Christ. I wasn't always. It took a lot to convince me, let's just put it that way. But yeah, so I'm always on the lookout for good biblically themed games because there hasn't been that many over the years. That's beginning to change. And basically this game, if you like a game like Pandemic, this is going to have some of those same type of feelings added into the game. There's some similar mechanisms. It's a cooperative game, and you're a bunch of different prophets that are basically going throughout Israel trying to rid sin from the land before the destruction of Israel happens. Anyway, I'm going to go into a little bit of how to play this, and then I'm going to come back with my final thoughts. All right, so here's the map of Kings of Israel. You got your blessing, resource, location, and sin and punishment cards right over here. You've got some ability cards we're going to go into here in a minute. You've got really, really nice player aids that help you with everything you need to know. I mean, you almost don't need the rule book. Almost. Typically, you're going to start off with 2 resource cards. Now, you're going to be one of the prophets, and you're going to start off with a prophet ability, which will help you win the game. Because remember, it is cooperative. You're all trying to work together, and you want specific powers to help you. So, for example, you've got Determined. After building an altar, remove any sin cubes and or idols at that location. You also have your starting location of Kabul, which we put one out there right now. We'll just stick that there. You've got the Trader. Once per turn, you may discard 1 resource card to draw a new one for free. You've got the Trailsman. Moving out of a mount location does not take an action. That's pretty powerful because it costs you an action to do that normally. You've got Giving. It does not take an action for you to perform the Give Resources action. You may also give resources to any prophet that is adjacent to you by the road. And so on and so forth. There's a ton of them in the game. We're just showing you just a few to start. So let me go ahead and show you the blessing cards you'll get. Now, you'll typically get these. There's a variant for easy mode, which lets you get them every time you make a sacrifice. But also, you get them on any part of this timeline that has gold on it. That means good kings. I'll show it to you real fast. So anytime you see who would be considered a good king, you'll get a blessing card. Any of the red kings, down to Israel's destruction, any of the red kings, you get a sin and punishment card. Now, your ultimate goal is to build as many altars as you possibly can according to the rules before Israel is destroyed. If you ever run out of sin cubes or calf idols when you need to place them, the game ends as well. So you have to watch that. As you can see on the game board, there are several different kinds of locations. There's mountain locations, there's towns, there's neighboring countries and things of that nature. And this is basically what you're going to be moving on. You can also use the shipping routes. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you some of these blessing cards you'll get. You've got Fire from Heaven. As anybody who knows the Bible, that's from Elijah's time. Put this card face up on the table. If a player builds an altar on Mount Carmel, discard this card and remove up to 2 idols or 3 sin cubes from anywhere on the board. That's pretty powerful. You've got the Forgiveness of Sins. Remove all sin cubes from 1 prophet's location. You've got Gifts from the Sea. Place 1 resource card face up at each of the seaports. Anyone who starts in or enters one of these ports may take that location's card. Giving. Each player may immediately give 1 resource card from their hand to another player anywhere on the board. And so on and so forth. There's a lot of different kinds of blessing cards in the game, okay? There's also the sin and punishment cards, okay? So you've got these. I'll tell you the one that reminds me of an epidemic card slightly is the Baal worship card. Put the top 2 non-nation location cards from the location discard pile under this card. Foretold event. The locations under this card each receive one idol and then are discarded. And remember, idols are basically 3 sin cubes combined, okay? If you receive something else there, it's going to spread sin to neighboring countries and or towns and things like that. So you got Judah's influence. Foretold event for both Jericho and Bethel. Unless a prophet is present, remove any altar from that location and add an idol. King builds idols. Sounds like Jeroboam to me. Place idols in both Bethel and Dan, okay? Brimstone and fire, foretold event. A location containing the most sin cubes is destroyed and cannot be entered again. Discard any altars there, mark it with a destruction cube, and any sin cubes or idols that location has or receives are instead placed on this card permanently. And see, I got a couple in there. Now, there's several phases in the game turn order. The King's Godliness phase. The starting player is going to draw a blessing card during the reign of a good king, kind of like what we talked about, or a punishment card during the reign of a bad king. So if we're on the gold area, we're going to go ahead and pull that blessing card, and we go ahead and read it, and we do what it says. Whatever it says, you go ahead and take care of it. And obviously, if it was a bad king, we would pull the sin and punishment card. And then you have the sin increases phase. Now, you're going to draw a number of location cards equal to the number of players plus 1. Sin increases in those locations. So in this case, we're pretending we got 2-player game going on. We'll pull 3. When it comes to these neighboring nations, instead of putting sin cubes on those, they're going to be spreading out from wherever they are. So for example, if you got Judah, it's got 2 arrows going out from these specific locations. And now what you'll do is you'll go ahead and spread the sin that it's going out from. So for one, we put one in Bethel, and we hit Jericho. Now that's going to go ahead and pop, and it's going to spread more sin throughout the nation. So let's go ahead and do that. Mount Nebo, Jabesh Gilead, and oh good, look, Bethel gets another one, as well as Jericho itself. And now we have the prophet's work phase, okay? And now you can do your prophet actions. Now you can move. That's going to require you to go ahead and move 1 action, 1 space. So if I wanted to move there, I can do 1 action. Now on some cards, you may be able to move more if you discard that card, and it says use 1 action, like this cattle card, use 1 action to move up to 3 spaces via road. You can preach to Israelites, or you remove 1 sin cube from your current location. So if I was over here at Shiloh, I was already there, or, if I entered in and I had more actions, I can go ahead and remove a sin cube for each action, right? I can destroy an idol. It requires 2 actions, but I can remove the idol from that current location. So for example, if I was here, I could go ahead and remove this. Goodbye. But it costs me 2 actions. I can acquire resources. I can draw 1 resource card from the resource deck. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these, because the next thing that I'm going to be doing is building an altar or making a sacrifice. And also, you can trade resources with somebody at a location as long as they're in the same location with you. You can trade up to 2 resource cards. Now let's go ahead and build an altar. If I was going to do that, I would discard a stone card, wood, and a gold. Okay, and let's go ahead and build this altar now that I've discarded. Okay, so I'm going to build an altar there. Now, why would I want to build there? Because the next action you could do is make a sacrifice if you want. Discard cattle and grain, and now you made a sacrifice. Now let's just pretend that there were extra sin cubes all around. Not only would I remove the sin cubes from my current location, but I can remove 1 from any adjacent location connected by a road. So altars are very powerful, and you can put them in strategic spots. You're going to have a lot more control over the board and what's happening. Once all the prophets have taken their turns, you go to the end of round phase. You pass the starting player card to the player on your left, basically clockwise order. And then you move the timeline token down to show the next round begins, and you start all over with King's Godliness phase. And in general, that's pretty much how you play this game. It's very simple, easy to learn. Now, if you want to do like advanced variants, there's other variants in the book which also include the false prophet. He basically starts in Samaria, and he can go around destroying altars and spreading chaos and things of that nature. And there's also an easy mode, and there's even a campaign mode in the book itself. Now, let's get back to my final thoughts. Now, typically my videos, I try to go into pros and cons if there are any, and then I give my final rating. What did I think ultimately? Pro side, let's go into production quality. Production quality was good. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't like, jaw-dropping, but it was actually really good for what they were trying to do. I like the artwork on the cards. I like the text on the cards explaining what each card does. The board was decent. Like I said, it laid the map out of Israel, nice as it was. I mean, you could pretty much plainly see where each city was on the map. They even had different pictures to show whether or not you were going to a mountain or a city, or even, I think, distant land of like Aram and Philistia and things of that nature. On mechanics, if you're used to Pandemic, it's not going to be too difficult to get into this game. There are some differences between the two games, but in this sense, you're still having some things like if you get 3 sin cubes in the place, it turns into a calf idol, and yeah, sin will spread the more that you get, just kind of like Pandemic. But the difference is that there's only one type of I guess you'd call sin a virus in this game. There's only one type of virus in this game. Pandemic, there's like 4 of them, right? And so that's one thing that's kind of spreading all over the map. And we jokingly kept saying when we were building altars, they felt like the research stations kind of, except they don't necessarily help you to get to places. You have to put the sacrifices on them to actually help rid sin. And I like that mechanic of ridding sin in one spot, but also any connecting spot, it helps to rid of some of the sin that's there. You are going to definitely be cooperating and strategizing exactly where you need to go, and the game will throw curveballs at you. I mean, it'll have that sin and punishment cards. They'll start coming out and everything, and you're having to watch and be careful with what you're doing, because some of those cards will take things away from you. Some of them will screw up your hand limit. The game is not overtly difficult. If you add in the false prophet, the false prophet goes around and he likes to destroy altars, and he likes to just generally add mayhem to the whole thing. Then yeah, it's going to be really, really difficult at points. So that's where also the blessing deck comes in, and I like the idea that with good kings, the land was blessed. Thematically speaking, it worked. With good kings, it's like God's blessing the land. With bad kings, sin's overrunning the land, and God's blessing slightly taken away, and so bad things happen. It's like the consequences rule, I also like the fact that each card had biblical scripture on it. And so in a sense, you could actually sit down with your kids and you could play this game with them and actually teach them biblical scriptures, help them to understand what is going on at this time, especially the history in the Bible and things of that nature. So when it comes down to that, especially if you're a believer in Christ, or if you just want to learn biblical history, this is a great tool for that, okay? I also really like the resource cards, how, you can combine them to build altars, or combine them to make sacrifices, or some of them, I think it's the grain and the cattle, you can go ahead and get rid of those cards to help you move 3 spaces to get somewhere faster. Another pro is this is a very quick game ultimately. I mean, you're talking 45 minutes, maybe even less if you know what you're doing, and depending on if you're losing. Now, were there any cons in the game? I mean, not overtly. I guess it comes down to, for example, I have been getting tired of Pandemic over the years. I still think the game's okay. And to be honest with you, the thing that made me want to play it more was playing Pandemic Legacy. I'm really into that game, but I needed something for regular Pandemic to kind of spice it up. Expansions were nice, but it just wasn't enough, and I was just getting kind of tired of the same old thing, So in that vein, it kind of stopped being the type of game I wanted to play anymore. This has a lot of similarities, and so because of how I feel about Pandemic, I have some similar feelings to this, but it does not mean it's a bad game by any stretch. So it's more of a subjective con for me. This is not a game I'm wanting to pull out all the time, right? It's not one I'm going to play, every week necessarily. But it is a quality, good game, and I liked it, actually. We everybody at the table had a great time playing it. As a matter of fact, we were ready to play it again after the first go-around, So, I mean, it was like, let's play it again. And so, in that respect, because of the differences between it and Pandemic, I kind of want to play this a little more. And so, if you like Pandemic and you don't get turned off by the theme, then you might like this game. Let's just put it out there, okay? As a Christian, like I said, I wasn't always, but as a Christian, I actually am more bent to like it, but if the mechanisms suck, I would not like this game. as it stands, it had enough differences from Pandemic with the resource cards, the way that they functioned, the blessing cards and things like that. Some of the different actions that you can take that have some differences from Pandemic. It had enough differences that said to me, yeah, I like this game a little bit more than my standard game of Pandemic, which again had been tapering off for me for some time. Now, the ultimate thing you have to ask yourself is, are you okay playing a biblical theme? If you're not a Christian, I still think there's enough in here, if you can say, okay, I don't care, that you'll probably like the game, because the mechanics alone and thematically it all works together. I think it works, you know what I mean? What do I give this on a rating scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the best? I give this about a 7. I've actually really enjoyed it. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it as much because, again, I was kind of tapering off a Pandemic. This is definitely one of the best biblically themed games I've played so far. I highly recommend this. Thank you so much for watching the Dice Odyssey today. You have a blessed day, and game away. This video is brought to you by Fallen Dominion Studios. Check out their website at fallendominionstudios.com.